Hello everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to look at a game, flip the board actually, look at it from my perspective, that I played many years ago against a friend of mine, Richard Pert. Now weirdly enough, he wasn't a friend of mine before the game. I never really spoken to him before that much, I don't think, from memory. But this game was played, I think it was either Hastings 1995 or Hastings 1996. There was a summer tournament in Hastings 1995. Now I think there might have been a winter tournament the end of that year. It was either the end of that year or the year after, and it was played on the pier. So it's very cold. It was played on the old pier, and I just remember it being very cold the whole tournament. So the round one I lost to a German guy, I think. It's kind of an older guy. Might even be dead by now. Don't know. And it was a 4 pawns attack, and I remember I used to play the 4 pawns attack as white, so it was white in that game. I played a 4 pawns attack, and I basically was playing down his theory line, but he seemed to know it pretty well. But the annoying thing was he kept falling asleep at the board, so he'd fall asleep and then wake up, play like the best move, and then basically just beat me. I felt like a complete idiot. I mean, he's quite a decent player. He's probably about 2100 or something like that. But I just felt like an idiot, you know. So I think now I'd have a word with him and say, look, you don't fall asleep. It's disrespectful. It's disrespectful. So anyway, round two, I'm playing Richard. So Richard might have lost in round one as well. I don't know. I don't remember. But anyway, let's have a look at the game. Yeah, it was hard to find this game. Richard had to ask. I couldn't find this game. It wasn't on the database. None of my games in this tournament were on the database. If you can find any of those games, let me know. I was actually, the game seemed to be lost in time. Richard only found it because his old chess coach from when he was younger, called Kevin O'Connell, I believe is some kind of computer expert actually, in chess computers, had the copy of that game. So I went a6, this looks normal, and I went e6, bishop b3, I went bishop e7. So actually the normal theory is b5. I don't know why I didn't go b5. I mean, I must have known this theory by this point anyway, but I went bishop e7. And then Richard played g4, which is quite a good move order. So I think against b5, g4 maybe is less tempting, because I guess you could, I'm not sure, even sure. Well, I mean, for a start, you could go bishop b7, right? And then you're directly hitting the pawn. So g5 is going to run into knight e4. So I don't think that's very good for white. Although, who knows, maybe a move like queen h5 is possible. But then g6. There's also b4, although b4 you also have to watch out for bishop a4 check moves, but then you can just move the knight, it shouldn't be an issue. And if the knight moves, then you take the pawn. So I think really that was a slightly sloppy move order by me, bishop e7. Richard played g4. Not that g4 is winning, but if you're not well prepared for it, which clearly I wasn't, then it's quite a dangerous move to me. And actually I've had this online recently and struggled as black, so it's funny how you don't learn from your mistakes. I would have guessed the computer probably evaluates position as around about equal at this moment. What did I play? I went h6. This is kind of committal, but you're creating weaknesses, which is kind of scary with that bishop there so active in the game. So actually, if you compare this position to, say, for example, Keres attack, in the Keres attack, that's against the Sheva-Ningen move order. White plays an early g4, but the bishop would be on f1. Here the bishop's on b3, which is an even more dangerous attacking position. So maybe h6 wasn't the best reply. I mean, knight c6 is obviously a move. And if g5, then you bring the knight back. Maybe stuff like this starts to become very dangerous for black. I probably calculated this in the game and was worried about it. Quite rightly so, because this looks very dangerous for black. Maybe just knight f5 here actually. Again, I've not used an engine so I'm probably making horrible mistakes in analysis. I didn't really have like strong engine. We're talking mid 1990s, so we didn't use engines much. I don't think from memory I had a laptop at that point. Didn't really have chest base. So this is like pre-Gormally wired up with all his engines era. But I was still a very strong player. But in this position, another move you could possibly consider as d5, just to meet a wing attack with a counter in the centre is very logical. But then I think white is better, possibly. Maybe just take is one option, and then if you take here, we take, and then seem to have quite a good position. For example, move like bishop e3 is possible. Maybe queen f3. Maybe queen e2 is also possible, or even knight f5 is sometimes going to be considered by white. Anyway, in the game went h6. Let's look at the game. Too much preamble. Yeah, so here, yeah, obviously now at this point I felt uncomfortable about the idea of castling on the king's side, because his rook's on g1, he's going to go h4, g5. So why didn't I go, for example, to move d5? I think d5 here looks more logical, right? Probably I should have given that a try, or thought a bit longer about it, because that looks like a logical move. And sometimes you can even maybe, I think at this point in my career I wasn't sophisticated enough to think, maybe waste a move. Even though you wasted a move, you can play bishop b4. I hadn't really sort of learnt that idea of, you just start from move 1 with every position. Okay, get rid of that. Shouldn't have. Yeah, so d5 was potentially a move there. I went queen c7, so that was obviously then you're kind of putting your mouth in the lion's den, because he goes h4, Richard goes h4. Again, very complex position, number of possibilities here. Like most Sicilians, very, very complex. Maybe knight d4 was a move, but then he didn't take out the queen. This looks clearly better for white already. A move like this just gives him this d5 square forever. And once he goes g5, he's going to maybe even bring the knight into d5 when even queen b6 with a better endgame is possible. Again, I don't know what the best move is here. So you watching at home, you got as much knowledge as me of this game, what the best move might be. So if you come up with any ideas, by the way, please send your games into this channel. I'm going to try and put some other people's games on this channel. I'm trying any kind of sort of angle to try and get the viewer count up, because the subscriber count, if anything, I'm losing subscribers. Probably the only YouTube channel that's losing subscribers. But it's tough. YouTube is very competitive. But I'll play this move h5, which is kind of very committal, because now Richard took. I probably expect him to go g5, but then knight g4 would have been a good response, I guess. That was what I was intending. But he took, which is maybe that, I think from memory that kind of took me by surprise. I took with a knight, bishop g5. I think this is where Richard's very good at making sort of straightforward, like attacking moves. This is like a strength of his. He's quite a good all-round player, I would say. Him and his brother were both very good juniors, and Richard always often says that he was possibly ahead of Nick. So Nick is his twin brother, so they're both very good for twins. They're probably as good, almost as good as any twins could be. I think there's this German kids who are quite good now, Rasmus and who's the other one? I've forgotten the name. I think they're potentially brothers at least, maybe not twins, but there's also the Musichuk sisters. So it's obviously an advantage to have a brother or sister who plays chess in some ways. Because you're both interested in chess and you can be competitive with one another. Where the disadvantage is, I think, is potentially, your negative results or their positive results can be compared. You can be compared negatively to your brother or your sister if they've gone ahead of you. But yeah, in general, it's positive because you could use each other as a kind of competitive sort of standard bearer to kind of trying to measure yourself against. But anyway, I'm babbling as usual. Bishop g5 seems like a decent move actually. Why didn't I just go knight f6? That looks more sort of. I was probably afraid of the time that I'm wasted. It feels somehow more natural to play that move. Now, if Richard would have gone, let's say, queen d2, maybe now I go. The problem is here that the black king is not completely safe casting queenside either, but actually does look fairly safe for the time being. So if he castles, I castle. I don't think knight b5 is going to worry me. There is a danger that it could come back at some point, but then h4 would be hanging and g7's hanging. Maybe g6 at some point you play. Knight b5 again. Maybe it doesn't work, or maybe it does, I don't know. I think here you could probably even... Maybe you could even get away with this move, I'm not sure. Because if you take, I take, right? And if you go here, then I go queen a5. If you go back, I go queen a5 anyway, maybe. Because this pawn is defended now. So, yeah. Although there's tricks like knight a7, but I think you can just go king c7. And then knight c6 is queen e1, and then you take back. So I think black should be okay here, but yeah, I mean another option is to take, but then obviously d6 is weaker. So I did all this, but that looks a bit, so I took now, so I think I was kind of feeling the pressure at this point. Richard took back the pawn. Yeah, now I started to realise it's going wrong here. I mean, this already looks wrong. I think I just felt uncomfortable here. I just felt the pressure. So there's moves like g6 now, weakening e6, which look kind of obvious, right? That's what he played, yeah. And queen a7, and now I'm like falling apart. I think I just felt the pressure from this early g4 stuff from memory, and just was surprised how quickly Richard was putting me under pressure. And knight d5 was like a killer blow, like Patzer Gormally. I felt like a Patzer at this point. If I made a queen, it's knight b6. Yeah, and it decided. I mean, obviously this is also winning as well. But then I could hope some kind of blockade. But he went knight b6, which means that if I continued, and I resigned after knight b6, if I'd continued here, this pawn on d6 is very weak. So that was the game, and let's have a look at how accurate the game was. So I mentioned, for example, that, yeah, I think actually h6 was okay, it wasn't too bad. Even queen c7, not, I mean d5 I mentioned, not the best move actually. Because actually just gets very fluid development. So d5 there, probably queen c7. It says the best move is simply develop, and actually maybe put the queen on a5 because then you're hitting e4 with tempo. Right, that makes some sense. It's kind of like slightly awkward for black. I went there, it's not too bad, but not ideal. Well, now I have to do this h5 move probably. Took with a knight. Bishop g5, yeah, so I mentioned knight f6 might have been, it's not a terrible move, it's not great, but, so it's saying actually the best move, which I don't think Richard would have played, is knight takes c6. You know, computers love that move now, because they're not afraid of the, obviously I could be doing Richard a disservice, maybe knight c6 would have been his first move, but, it feels counterintuitive. Computers love this move now because they're not afraid of this. Like back in the day, you was afraid of like black recapturing and going d5 and building the centre. But computers now prefer this move to what we used to consider it, because basically just a gain of time. You're gaining time. You can now move your queen and then quickly castle, and certainly you're not afraid of any b file pressure. You're opening up the b file here, but the bishop on b3 is just stopping any b file pressure for black. So that would have been possible. But I went bishop d7, which wasn't too bad actually. That was probably yeah. Now knight f6 might have been better, yeah, because now I can take back the bishop. And yeah, I think this is where I should have probably castling again wasn't too bad, but I kind of panicked. I started panicking around about here. So up to this point, I actually played a reasonable game. I kind of, you know, I didn't really know what I was doing, but you know, now I started to crumble completely, which I don't quite understand why I did actually. Even here is what I just, my next move is just a shocker. It's just a blunder. No, it's not even a blunder. So, but well, I mean, I could play something like this, and then you're not necessarily afraid of this because, right, you get a lot of pressure. This is there's a hole here. I'm going to come here. I went bishop c6. Oh, that was the blunder, right? So king b8, even king b8 here, I'm okay. I think I'd probably see stuff like this now. That's maybe the difference. I would have put up more resistance. So I'll probably calculate better now. I went e5, which is kind of like a panic move. Yeah, then I'm dead. So what was the accuracy level? My guess is the accuracy level is, I'd say Richard was like 96, 97, and I was probably low 90s. But it's a complete guess. It seemed like Richard didn't make any mistakes, whereas I had made one serious mistake. Other than that, I didn't really make many. So it was really the game revolved around one move, and I kind of had this memory of this game where I basically was just outplayed the whole game, and you know, I was in big trouble from move one. But that's an exaggeration. What have we got? It's giving me 100% at the moment, but that seems to be an exaggeration. It's now processing. I'm dipping. Yeah, so I actually gave myself, yeah, I really was brought down with my accuracy level because of that one blunder. Other than that, I made no inaccuracies, no mistakes, but that one blunder was really like so shocking that it brought my inaccuracy level down. Richard had one inaccuracy. Is 97%, yeah, pretty high accuracy level. So basically, after that game, so we played on the pier, and I wandered out, and I was sort of, you know, in shock. I've just like lost my first two games, and I was already quite a decent player by that point, so I wasn't expecting that to happen at all. But then Richard started chatting to me. I was like, well, what's he chatting to me for? He's just beating me. He's like the last person I want to talk to, right? But Richard was like a more kind of like outgoing person to me, so we got chatting, and we became friends after that. And later I got to know his brother as well. Nick was also a nice guy. And yeah, I mean that was kind of, so I had like a few close friends in British chess. Probably like Richard, Simon Williams, John Naylor. But basically, because I'm quite a shy person, I think with all those kind of people, they started talking to me first, right? From memory. And you know, certainly at that period I was more shy than I am now, even more shy, so I was a very quiet person. But obviously once I came out of my shell, then I was like, yeah, you know, like let's go down the pub and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, that's kind of... So Richard, the story of Richard was, he was obviously a very good junior like his brother, and but I think Nick had a stronger work ethic. In a sense, he was more into the chess study really, and Richard would play a lot, but he didn't really study as hard as Nick, I would say, and that's probably the separator. So they were more or less the same for a long period, but then Nick went ahead because he was basically, he won the World Junior because he just basically worked harder, and Richard got a job working in the city. So he started off, left university, got a job working at McDonald's, and then he got a job working in the city. And so he didn't really play chess as much as he would have done. And I think he would have definitely been a GM. Whether he'd have been a strong GM like 2600 plus, that's another story. It's all dependent on how much work you put in, really. If you do 8 hours a day, you're probably going to be 2700 plus. If you don't, then you're not going to be. You're probably going to be like filtering around it. I think he feels frustrated in a way because obviously, he doesn't get conditions for tournaments, and there's GMs who have a lower rating than him, probably like myself. I'm probably lower rated than him now, or close to being lower rated, who get much better conditions, and he's younger than we are, and he's basically not getting any conditions at all. And I kind of understand that as well. I mean, for example, the upcoming British Championships, Brandon Clark would have been potentially one of the better players. Well, he's not getting any conditions, so he's going elsewhere. So I actually think they need to change the structure of how you invite players. Now, traditionally, which would obviously harm me because I'm a GM, but traditionally GMs would get conditions and IMs wouldn't for stuff like the British Championships. However, I think now, because there's so much deflation in the system, it's harder to become a GM. So therefore, I would say that they need to change the structure and just look at the rating more, and say, look, if you're 2490, you should be getting conditions over someone who's 2410, 2360, or at least equal conditions to those players, right? That's just my opinion. But yeah, Richard is still a good player. I mean, he's still trying to get GM norms and stuff. But he's going to be. He's probably not going to make GM title now because of all the deflation in the system, and they're trying to correct it. But yeah, it's just harder to become a GM now. The people who are becoming GMs are like little kids, like 12-year-old Henry Edward Tudor and stuff like that, and Faustina Oro and people like that who are like basically just young, and they've got the time to spend 8 hours a day studying chess. Like adults who don't have the time or don't have the kind of like sponginess of their brain to absorb all this kind of information aren't going to get to sort of 2600 plus 2700 plus. So yeah, anyway, so that was an interesting game. And again, like, please leave your comments below. Please please send me your games. I'll probably link my email in the description. And yeah, again, thanks for watching.